Upcoming session on stage Grantham, the Half Empress, Tripti Pandey in conversation with Priya Nair. Over to the speakers.
Hello and good afternoon to everyone here. Good afternoon, Ms. Tripti Pandey, and welcome to KLF. Well, she has written a book called The Half Empress, and this book deals with a lady called Rasa Kapoor and the Maharajas, Sawai Jagat Singh. It is an enthralling read, and as a cultural ambassador of Rajasthan, Ms. Pandey has made a beautiful attempt to draw us into the myths and the fables and the history of Jaipur. So you have Rasa Kapoor, a very interesting character, born of a Brahmin father and a Muslim mother, who with her beauty, her skills and indomitable courage navigates the upper echelons of the royal family and ends up as the favorite consort of the king. How did you get to this character, madam?
First of all, Namaskaram Kerala. It's my first visit to Kozhikode. I'm very, very happy to see so many people and rather delighted to be in the AC hall after the humidity. I would suggest all those people who are a little behind, come forward. I'm telling you a great story, a love story of all kinds, which will transport you to the palace life. Come forward because there are enough chairs. And I like to see your faces and read into your eyes. Come forward. So getting into the character, it is very interesting because Ras Kapoor, she was a dancing girl and a courtesan of 19th century when the Britishers were inching in and the French were already here and the Holkars and the Marathas were plundering the princely estates. And the princely estates were also not sure whether to fight, whether to govern the estates or to have a great love affair. So I got into this character. There's very little written about women of the princely times unless they were in a ruling seat or they were Lakshmi Bai. But a courtesan of a harem or the women of harem, even the queens were not so much written about. So when I chanced upon Ras Kapoor, and they said, those of you who know of Colonel Todd, he said, this lady should not be written about in some words you can read out from the book, but because she influenced the Maharaja, but the Maharaja gave her the title of the Half Empress. If she was the Half Empress, and she governed the state in many ways, that means she was very intelligent. She was not just beautiful. She was somebody special. So I said, I have to really explore the beauty, the childhood of that girl. How was she raised? If she was a daughter of a Brahmin priest and mother was a Muslim courtesan, that means she had a very secular and different kind of upbringing. While the priest was sort of raising her to be so intelligent, to be spiritually divine, she was meant to really rule the heart of the Maharaja and come across as a dignified woman. While the prostitutes or the courtesans were trying to train her in a way that she could succeed to be another beautiful courtesan. So I wanted to get into her mindset. How did she rise? How did she ask her Brahmin father the questions when the father said, you are a Dhruv Tara? She asked, what is Dhruv Tara? Who is Dhruv Tara? And the father related the story of the Dhruv Tara, but Dhruv was a male child. And she turns around and says, but I am a girl. Then he says, he was surprised. Then he says, no, but you are my star. So that is how I narrate the story of Dhruv Tara. And so I get into several such mythological tales as well. So I got into the mindset of that innocent girl whose life was being shaped by an ambitious priest who wanted to be the Prime Minister of Jaipur state. On the other side, the courtesans were training her to be singer or a dancer because she was so beautiful. She was born as a very beautiful child. So the aspirations of the two were very different. So that is my story, that I went into the girl's mindset. No girl child is born with any special traits apart from the beauty, but how she is raised decides her fate.
Well, you begin this text with a quotation from Colonel James Todd. I just read out, in the height of his passion for the Islamite concubine, he formally installed her as queen of half his dominions and actually conveyed to her in gift a moiety of the personality of the crown. Now, is that deliberate? You quote from the imperial perspective. So are you trying to sort of dislodge the imperial gaze by purposefully quoting Colonel James Todd at the very beginning of this wonderful narrative?
Well, I'm quite likely to say that the courtesans were having a very dignified life. They were the people who taught manners, etiquette to the rulers. But actually the British ran them down and they made them, they turned them around as nautch girls and nautch girls of lower strata who could be used. But a courtesan was a woman of substance. She was not an ordinary lady. So that's why I said it, what Colonel Todd said. And actually, who knows, he wrote it from that point of view. But the very fact that he wrote about it, that she should not be written about. How can you not write about a woman who impacted the ruler's life to the extent that the entire Jaipur state was wondering, what is this woman all about?
I thought that was a very brilliant move to begin with dislodging the imperial gaze, because that is what we always follow when we try to read Indian history very paradoxically. Another paradox which I found was focusing on Maharaja Sawai Jagat, who is not really, your stereotypical idea of a powerful leader. And I guess in contemporary world, we find these chest-thumping alpha males who are voted to power, who are elected to power, and you chose to write about Sawai Jagat Singh. Is that a very strong political patriot, statement that you're trying to make?
I was not writing only from the feminist point of view, but the Maharaja's time was such that people wrote, even Colonel Todd wrote, that this guy did nothing. His life was all around this courtesan, this nautch girl. And so I knew, and even to the extent that for Maharaja Sawai Jagat Singh, there is no cenotaph built in the area where the cenotaphs of the Maharajas were built. And in fact, very recently when I was researching the story, I discovered that there is no cenotaph of Jagat Singh. So I did not write to run him down. I did write to elevate the girl who was given the title of the Half Empress and Ardha Rajan, as in Hindi they say. So somebody asked me, what did you get out of this book? I said, I returned the title to the lady.
You also say that paradoxically, Ras Kapoor now only lives in the memory of the tourist guides. And you are somebody who has been actively working for the tourism department as well. How do you think, writing about such characters, writing about these half-forgotten figures in Indian history will attract tourists towards India? Is that also part of the larger plan?
Well, that could very well attract. When you go to America, in Alaska, they have somebody who used to run a brothel, and that lady's saloon is being promoted. There are areas that they promote for the courtesans, for the area. Why go far away? Palais de Pigalle in Paris, they promote it as a tourist destination, as a visitor. But here is a story where there is romance, and romance always attracts. And the romance is inscribed in the historical buildings. So when you go there, suddenly the story comes alive. You read the story, and this was a beautiful woman who lived, who was a real life story. You are not telling a story which was a different story, and she was imprisoned in one of the forts, and nobody knows what happened to her at the end of the story.
Yes, I guess that's so true. We rarely tap our resources if you look at it that way. Because if you go to the UK, you have an entire museum dedicated to Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, very interesting. All characters of the books come alive. When you tell their stories through the monuments, who knows, I may walk all this audience in Jaipur with the story of this book. Who knows? You know?
I mean, I, for one, I really wanted to go back and visit Jaipur once I finished reading the book. Another thing which I found very interesting was that the end, how she dies, and there's a lot of mystery around her death. And you make this comment that she was forbidden to commit sati. She was denied the honor. If I'm quoting you right, you said she was denied the honor of allowing to commit sati.
It is a real story at the beginning of my prelude, where I talk about the Thakurs, the feudal lords of Rajasthan. And when I said that some text said that this courtesan performed the sati. So he said, no, she could have never performed because she was also imprisoned. She was designated prisoner. So as a prisoner, she could have not been allowed to commit a sati. And he said, why are you writing about her? And I told, and then the gentleman is no more, but I told him, I said, how can you say that she was a prisoner? Who knew that she was a convict in the real life? She was the prisoner designed to be a victim of all your clan men in the past.
And again, I quote from your book, this is her story, a person who belongs to history but has been turned into a fable. So you find the boundaries of myth and history being deliberately blurred at times. How did you actually navigate through these boundaries?
Yeah, it's interesting because there are myths around, there's oral history, there is factual history, and there are areas, that is why I call it historical fiction. Else it will be a historical document or a documented book. But the moment I say fiction, a historical fiction, gives me both the licenses. One, to tell you the story of the period and the history of the period, how the regent was interfering, how the Marathas were coming in, how Jodhpur and Jaipur fought over the princes of Udaipur. All that is recorded. But the courtesan's life, nobody recorded. Only the time she was given the title of Half Empress, that people worried that she will really be playing with the entire politics of Jaipur and what would be Jaipur's fate if she played any other negative role. So that's it.
And I think your research must have been quite a journey because you talk about coins which were minted in her name. You talk about a half-finished portrait. Could you just share some of your experiences?
Yeah, it's interesting because you see, the Raja, when he issued a coin in the name of a lady, that means she was somebody very special. So there was a coin issued in her name. But it is recorded. But nobody could trace the coin. Who knows those coins were melted as she disappeared in mystery. Who knows even the coins were melted not to leave any trace of her. But the other thing about the half-finished portrait, you did not have photography at that time. Nobody could say how beautiful she was. Only the miniature painters captured the beauty of the princess or the courtesan in a way even accentuated her beauty. So there is a story that there is a half-finished painting of hers, and I shot a picture and I put the picture here. And I said, maybe because she was given a title of the Half Empress. So maybe the half-finished painting or the portrait of hers somewhere has that story to narrate.
I think in some ways this book is a counter-narrative to the idea of Indian modernity as well. because you deal with a figure who is secular by her very birth, right? And in a time when we talk about secularism so much, we forget a time when this was quite ordinary, when nobody ever remarked about this. And that was one way of looking at it. Another way is looking at a woman who was quite disadvantaged by her birth. She was not of royal blood, but she managed to make her way up the hierarchy. So I think there is a counter narrative here as well.
It's interesting because see, secularism came with the lifestyle. When it came to courtesans, they could be from any religion. When it came to marrying a lady, she had to be coming from a Rajput clan. They did not marry. But in her case, because her mother was a courtesan and the father was a priest who did not want the world to know that he was the father, so he would sneak in to those gullies and the by lanes in the quiet of the night so nobody saw. And when he came out, and everywhere he was Mishraji, Mishraji, Panditji, Panditji. So, but Panditji had a mission. Panditji wanted to raise her in a way that she would be able to reach him to the level of being prime minister. In her case, she got the exposure to the Hindu lifestyle via Panditji. So she used to visit all the temples. And because of her Muslim lineage, her mother did not want her to learn any classical music, learn any dance. She wanted to keep her away. But her friends started visiting. And slowly, slowly, to a little girl, if you teach her dance, to teach her the mannerism of the saloon, of the courtesan saloon, she would grab it all, you know. So, but in her mindset, her divinity was such that she did not aim to be in the palace. It was a chance. She was being taken by the priest and other courtesan to this Hawa Mahal to see the performance, and that's where the prince saw her, and the prince saw the beauty of the girl. And then he decided, I have to get to this girl. And he saw her perform Kathak in one of the temples, and he said, I have to get this girl. And that is how he designed the entire journey of hers from that Haveli of the courtesan to the palace. And once she got into the palace, she knew she would be despised, she would be hated, she would be condemned. But she knew there was a man in her life, but she also had a very good friend right from her childhood, who was her confidant, Rudra, the character. He is my own brainchild. And he came to me, and she used to confide into him, and Rudra wanted to marry her. But she was already taken away to the palace. And then what happens to Rudra, how he was being slain, how he was wiped away, is the story that you must read the book, and then you get to all the stories. I'm telling you all the love story. Something when a foreigner read my book, and she said, have you seen Hira Mandi on Netflix? Your book reminded me of that. And she even told me she cried after reading my book. So I thought, if I can reach the hearts beyond India, I'm sure I can reach the hearts of the people of Kerala.
That was my next question, actually, because when I read the book, I thought it was extremely visual. You know, you could actually see the palaces, the harems, the women, the stalwart men. You could see all these things, very, very visual. And actually, it made me want to visit Jaipur as well. Do you think it has the makings of a movie or a web series?
Well, I have been told that Rana Safai, if you know her Sufi writings, she met me. She told me, it's such a visual book, please see to it that your book is converted into a film or a series on any of the channels. I do not know, but who knows if Umrav Jan could become a film, my Ras Kapoor, my Half Empress would also appear somewhere in the visual world. And there would be a film, I'm sure. Who knows?
Yeah, and if you were to write factually about her, leaving aside all the romance, the the imagination, just a factual narrative about her, would that be very difficult?
Obviously, hardly any facts are mentioned anywhere. So how could I write any factual book on her? Then you wouldn't have had a beautiful book here to get into the world of that time. I talk about songs, I talk about festivals, I talk about the festivals that she celebrated with the Maharaja. I talk about when she sang Rag Basant on the Chandra Mahal at the city palace. So it is something very, very special. I would have not been able to take the flight of imagination, you know. So the facts would have been just a little four-liner like Colonel Todd.
I mean, that is indeed very interesting because we do have to resort to imagination, and that is where fables are born.
Yeah, and I would have not been able to tell that much of history. I could tell the story of Krishna Kumari, the princess of Udaipur, because Maharaja Savai Jagat Singh, the prince here, was also fighting a war with Maharaja of Jodhpur over the princess of Udaipur when he already had Ras Kapoor in his life, several queens in his life, several concubines and several courtesans in his life. But you know, when you fight over a woman, no number of women is sufficient for a Maharaja in that time, you know.
I mean, if I were to ask you about your next projects, what would they be like?
Well, you find me a publisher, I have several projects. And well, I have another story that I'm researching on. And it's a story that I don't want to talk about. But first it will be an interesting story because I ran into a Rajput girl at the city palace while I was going for Diwali festival. In the alley there, she asked me if I was writing a sequel. So not a sequel, but stories that come from harems, stories that come from the zenana. I will find one.
And when you think about the contemporary readers, we find that people don't read that much. People are not. They're mostly living out their lives in Instagram. As a writer, how would you look at this contemporary reader?
Well, do post on Instagram, but post there. But then buy the book. Instagram can only be a few lines or a reel. But book takes you back in time. When you told me, she read the book. And I asked her, have you read the book? And she said, she loved it. And then I said, we don't want to know the questions. We will let the story and the session go with the flow because you have read the book. If you love the book, what would you do? An Instagram story or a picture from this session or the book along?
Yes, and I'm sure that you have a very active Instagram profile as well. I'm sure people here would love to know more about you. They can just go to the profile. But I really hope they would read the book as well because it is an enchantingly written book.
Well, it's so nice. Have you been to Jaipur? And now, do you want to come to Jaipur?
Exactly.
And if she wants to come to Jaipur, having read this book, that means telling the story of romance, mystery, of the people, the lesser known people, of the lesser strata or the lower strata, but have a story of emotions to narrate, then I'm sure you will have to come to visit that place. I'm sure Kerala also must be having several such stories. So those stories bring life to the place. A place is merely a place. People make it, they turn it into a romantic destination. Why do you say people come for wedding destinations to Rajasthan? It's all about the romantic appeal of Rajasthan.
As a person who works for the tourism industry, could you throw some light on the type of work that you do? You write for them, you create content.
Well, I would say tourism has been my profession, culture has been my passion. And India's USP is cultural tourism. So for me, culture and tourism or my profession or my passion don't go away. I learned a lot from the country called Austria, where I studied. And I created a music festival in the desert. and that's called the Desert Festival. But the romance of the Desert Festival was to create it with the lunar calendar dates. So I have the full moon night on the sand dunes. Otherwise, I would have had the calendar, regular calendar dates, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, but I would have not had the full moon night. And I am romantic at heart, and I live in Rajasthan. So obviously, I love to tell stories. I love to highlight the landscape. I love to do such things. I have done a lot of work with the snake charmers. My stories can be there as well. My books are there. I came to Kerala for my book on India's elephants, a cultural legacy.
Yes, I was hoping that you would talk about that.
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well.
yeah. And I came here, I have integrated Kerala's cultural value. For me, that book is cutting across the cultural corridor from east to west to north to south. It's not just the wildlife corridor. For us, elephant is part of our culture. And who can tell us whether to have elephants in our celebrations or not? We live together, we will love to live together, and we'll take care of them. It's only how we look at them. Our cultural value has to be very strong. Let's not give up what the West tells us. Let's follow our traditions, our culture.
I guess we need to build upon our unique selling point. We need to identify what that is. And how better than to go into the, vast horizons of history and the myths that surround us.
Yeah.
And package it.
Yeah, yeah, obviously. Your packaging doesn't have to be this hotel, that resort. Culture has to be packaged. Whether it is Ras Kapoor's story, I said, I will walk to the Haveli where she lived. I will go to the temple, I'll take you there. I will read out the text from there. When I did my Where Silence Sings, the book, I had the Langas, Manganiyars, Kalbelias performing from the text what I had written there. So that's it, and I think you have to have a narrative in every destination. Make the people feel the place, not see the place. Feel the place, that's the important part of the story.
I think we can open this for audience questions, if there are any.
So questions to come in. What is this? About Ras Kapoor, you don't have to ask how did she die, where did she disappear, what happened to her. Yeah, please.
So the protagonist of your story,
Yeah.
the heroine of your story, I mean, I just imagine the way you were describing that the father wanted his aspirations to be lived through her, whereas the other people in her life, her mother's contemporaries, wanted to groom her a certain way. And mother wanted her to be away from all of this. So it must have been a very conflicted childhood for the girl, for the little girl. So how have you explored the subtleties around that?
Yes, it is very interesting. Great question. Because it was tough for her. Earlier she was enjoying. If father came and narrated a story at night of Chand or Dhruv or even the stories of Shiva's Mahamaya and all those stories when he told, she enjoyed. When the courtesan's friends came to teach her dance, she loved to dance. Which child will not love to dance? She was very skilled singer. But gradually when she was being spotted, she did not know what her life was going to be when she was moving in one chariot to the palace. And then she really reflects upon from where to where. And she wonders, is a courtesan's life always going to be this way, where she would never be married to any legitimate man in her life, whether the Maharaja will only use her, and what will be her fate? She wanted to be very good. She was very intelligent. She gave him a lot of advice on matters that I imagined at that time. So it was conflicting, but that woman was a woman of resilience. So my sections are distributed. Essence of camphor, Ras Kapoor. So I took the simile from camphor. Camphor, when you ignite, it catches the fire fast, and it also dissolves without leaving any trace. So Ras Kapoor's story, where it finishes, that one has to read. And the conflict, you'll know. I have told many stories. If I narrate everything,
Then what is the beauty of reading the book?
I will say immerse in this book, immerse in her character, immerse in her history. I'm sure you will have a great story to discover. And cultural value, several cultural festivals. The Leheria I described, how on Tej we wear Leheria and we wear the green color. So the people, I talk about the harem life, I talk about the Zanana, the festivals celebrated in the Zanana, the songs that were sung. So there's a lot of mirchi masala in that and lot of culture in that. So, but of course, read it. Lovely meeting you, and I think we are done.
Yeah, we're done, I guess.
Unless you have something else to say.
Thank you very much for your patient listening, and I hope all of you will go back and read The Half Empress, which, like camphor, leaves a breath of fragrance after we finish reading it. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Thank you. Namaskaram.
Thank you, Tripti Pandey, Priya K. Nair.